The Metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform and promises to be the next frontier for human experiences on the internet. Into the Metaverse covers companies, technologies, and trends that are bringing these promises to life. Join creator and host Jonathan Ross-Friedman, founder and CEO of Supersocial, as he interviews the brilliant minds that are building, shaping, and investing in the Metaverse.
Welcome to Into the Metaverse, where we help make sense of the Metaverse through deep interviews with the brilliant minds who build, create for, and invest in the Metaverse. I'm Jon, and joining me today are Mishi McDuff, founder and CEO of Blueberry Entertainment, and Shahar Sorek, CMO of Overwolf. We will cover in detail the role of user-generated content in fueling the Metaverse with content and experiences that help shape the future of the internet, and how digital fashion fits in. Just for a bit of background, Blueberry Entertainment is a digital wearables company which to date sold more than 20 million units of virtual clothing since its 2012 launch. Among other things, Blueberry launched recently a high-caliber fashion collection on Roblox in partnership with the Broadway show Dear Evan Hansen. And then Overwolf is the guild for in-game creators. It operates the Curse Forge, which is the world's largest mod repository, and is leading the way when it comes to partnering with major publishers and making sure that creators gets paid for their work. So, Mishi, Shahar, I'm delighted to welcome you to Into the Metaverse.
Thank you so much for having us.
As always, everything discussed on the podcast is not a financial advice. Content is strictly educational. All right, so let's dig in. The first thing I like to talk to every guest on the podcast, as we continue to build this evolving consensus around what the Metaverse is, the first question I want to ask you, each of you, what is the Metaverse for you? So let's start with Mishi, and then you can popcorn to Shahar.
I feel like the word metaverse intimidates people, but it's actually quite simple. It's digital space where your virtual identity matters. I mean, TikTok can be described as metaverse. It can be your video game where you socialize with your friends. As long as it's social and it's digital, we call it the metaverse.
Great.
That's interesting. We're taking it. We're digesting it all in. Shahar, over to you.
So I want to approach it from a different angle, more of a sociological angle, more of an evolutionary angle. I think that our society is moving into a space where our sense of identity is shifting from the physical world into the digital world. And the metaverse is the universe where the digital identity exists. A small story, I have a 7-year-old son, so we're quarantined, he's playing Roblox. We're 2 weeks in the house, he's with his pajamas. He comes to me and he says, "Dad, I'm going to my friend's birthday. Can you get me the black skin? Because I'm red skin all the time in the games and I need the black skin for this thing." And I'm like, "Dude, you're with your pajamas for 2 weeks straight. I'm trying to get you into normal clothes and you're coming to me and your clothes in the Roblox are more important to you than what you wear on a daily basis." It's a fun story, but it kind of emphasizes the care of the upcoming generations to their digital identities. So I think the metaverse and everything tied to it is words that are trying to get our head around the shift in society and the shift in perception of identity. And anytime we refer to it, we refer to a place where our identity is real, at least, if not more than the real world.
This is such a great story, Shahar. And I do think that part of what we will talk about today also is really the opportunity to reimagine what does creative and personal expression looks like in these new digital landscapes. And Mishi said something interesting, which actually Tim O'Reilly said in a podcast interview here a few months ago. He said that for him, even Zoom and being here now on Riverside is part of being in the metaverse, is the interaction of through a digital kind of channel where we are in the same time in a persistent manner and so on and so forth. And so I think that's exactly why I like to ask the question. And Shahar, I think your story makes a lot of sense, especially for anyone that has been exposed to the Roblox platform and seeing how, I like to tell people, anyone above 25 years old, they already live in the metaverse. Everyone above 25-year-old are people who are trying to explain the metaverse. Because when you talk to kids, they don't need to explain to you the metaverse because they don't think about it as this parallel new universe. This is real. This is what it is. And Shahar, when your kid cares more about his digital identities, because it actually probably is. And so it's not surprising.
And there are many, he went for a sleepover in the other day in another friend's house. So he built a Minecraft world and he had on it Ben and Ari's house. And he goes that it's as important to him as any other accessory experience he's bringing with him. And that's the offering when they go to play together. It's like, we're going to be together, but together we're going to meet in this world. And that's where we form our experiences. So there's a social experience that comes with it, which by the way, we say Metaverse. I come from games and AAA games, and I've played games all my life. Metaverse is a world that is very familiar to gamers. They've known it for decades. In the recent years, shifted to society abroad. But for us, World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Second Life, and many other games already were the beginning of the Metaverse. We'll talk about that a little bit when we go. But basically, that shift that is already happening is just going to accelerate, amplify.
I mean, I'm so glad you said that, because I'm also, I feel like a hardcore gamer, but I remember back in the day playing the very first mods of Warcraft, for example. And we're talking about, 14 years ago? Modding and communities building around it goes way, way back. So this is a world that I feel like so familiar with that it's hard to explain. It's also strange to see it being overcomplicated. These are not just video games that you play like Atari. These are social environments where you make friends and you're part of a community. And that's the same reason why I want my avatar to look so cool. It's the same reason I curl my hair for a podcast today. It matters. The first impression you make in the digital world is still through your avatar. And if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think we'll switch gears and take a step back before we go even further deeper in the metaverse. But we've seen it also on Roblox with Super Social, what we've done with Nars Coloquest and Nars Cosmetics, where you saw 18 plus young ladies on Roblox that are customizing their avatar with new makeup colors, et cetera, because it's all about expression. It's all about showing who you are. And I think virtual worlds provide that immense opportunity. But we're going to go much deeper. I want to take a step back, actually. And Shahar, starting with you, for the audience who is less familiar, what exactly does it mean to be an in-game creator? And why do you believe it plays such an instrumental role for the metaverse to emerge?
Okay, let me unpack. So since the inception of video games, there were players that were really passionate with the games they played, and some of them tweaked and played with them and changed them. One of the most notable first initial mods or changes to a game was to a 1983 game called Castle Wolfenstein, where you were running in a castle with Nazis. It was a very popular game. And then one of the gamers decided to it took Castle Wolfenstein and it changed the Nazis into Smurfs. And it was very popular and people loved to play it. But that's what it was. There was no, although many people played it and although it got traction, it was just a nice thing for him to have reputation-wise. So for many years and decades, the modders, or the people who made changes to game, or what we call in-game creators, were doing it for the fun of it. You love something and you do it. In the recent years, we've seen that, and I'm going to tie to the beginning of the conversation, that what I grew up and what most people that know grew up, they grew on game and submerge. Meaning you play a game and then you submerge yourself in it and you play it for days and weeks and over weekends and with friends. And then with the coming out of games like Minecraft and Roblox and Fortnite Creative, the paradigm changed where today it's game, submerge, and then change. And Overwolf recognized many years ago that the gaming industry is going to go through a massive transformation where at the core base floor, changes to the IP, to the title, will have to be allowed by the game because the users and the gamers will demand massive amounts of improvements, changes, customizations. And we started seeing it with titles like The Sims early on, but it wasn't until the massive success of Minecraft and Roblox that we see that this is becoming a social phenomenon. And it's also outside of it. TikTok is a user-generated content platform where all the creators are people, and it's about 3x time the context Netflix managed to put in a year. So we're seeing a whole inflection point around UGC. At Overwolf, we believe that is the base ground. And what Overwolf has done over the last 5-6 years is it changed the paradigm of making money, making changes. A good example would be YouTube, where once you could just make videos and upload them. There was no monetization scheme, so nothing mattered until YouTube came in and changed that paradigm. And suddenly you put up a video and it gets a lot of views, you're starting to make money. The same with in-game creations. What Overwolf has is a platform that allows in-game apps, mods, and private servers to monetize and make a living out of their passion. There's around 100,000 creators on the Overwolf platform, and about 1,200 of them are making north of $10,000 yearly. Some of them are making 6 to 7 figures monthly, and that's all from in-game creation. So basically, Overwolf invented a new profession. We call it in-game creation, on the hypothesis that the games world will change and UGC will become the ground production floor for a game to thrive.
Mishi, would you like to add from your experience with Blueberry? What's your take and what's the background for how you guys are thinking at Blueberry about user-generated content creators?
First of all, I think that Shahar made a great case on, and that's exactly how I see UGC as well. And I'm going to add a couple things to enhance that point. What we're seeing with buying patterns or engagement patterns from customers right now, they're not necessarily buying into products. They're not necessarily buying into brand. They're buying into community. That's the key separator here. And when you have passionate creators modding these games and creating content, the way the monetization started is, even though there was no official way for these creators to make money, people would donate through PayPal. They would mail checks. There was Patreon for these creators, and the community would support these creators. So there was this huge demand that nobody was really able to see before Overwolf really came into the picture. So I completely agree with everything Shahar said, and the game developers cannot compete with UGC. The UGC creators are constantly advertising what they created, they are pushing it to their community, they're building, the content is retention, it's making people come back. And the volume of content, like the example Netflix versus TikTok, the volume of content these content creators can push out and compete for quality between each other, your regular game developers humanly cannot keep up. So I don't see how there is no other option but for game industry to really embrace UGC just to stay relevant. So everything that Shahar said, plus.
I do want to double click on something, Shahar, that I think at Overwolf you guys are thinking about it as there's no. And I see it a lot at the moment, right? Some people say there's no metaverse without Web3. There's no metaverse without this. There's no metaverse without that. I think one of the arguments you guys have is there's no metaverse without UGC, without content creators or in-game content creators. Can you elaborate on what does that actually mean and why is it so fundamental to the emergence of what we think of as a network of proliferated virtual worlds that are interoperable, where you carry your identity and assets and so on and so forth?
Okay, that's a complex and a good question to unpack. Let's start with some basic assumptions that we believe. First of all, the metaverse, by and large, will come out from the games world, because that's the area where kind of the first experience of metaverse happened, but that's the area where the experience meets the demand of the people that want to be engaged in the metaverse. So something happens in these virtual environments from a game dynamic perspective that people love to be in, and that, again, it's an identity thing, that they love their identity in this experience. And once you have a digital experience that people are tied to emotionally and psychologically, that can extend itself and build out. Without that initial binder, it's going to be very tough for people to enter the metaverse, to actually engage in it. I think that's the word is used a lot, and from our perspective, there is, without that core constituting experience of a place I come to play and socialize and have fun in and achieve, there is no metaverse. Now, from that, because of this game submerged change that I talked about before, you have units of creators that love to play with these experiences and create more and more of them. A good example in our ecosystem is private servers. So Overwolf processes payments with our product TEBx of all the over 13,000 private servers. Some of them are the biggest in the world. One of the environments is a private server, for example, a private server of a GTA 5 called 5M. And 5M, there's many experiences. One of them, for instance, is a role-playing server or a role-playing mod environment where people, some of them famous people, come to play a character in GTA in a way that the game doesn't allow, but the mod does allow. And there's a few of these real-life people, streamers, sometimes influencers, that come to play clerks, cops, robbers, all sorts of characters in this mod. And then there's people that come and pay tickets to view them playing their characters. Now, this is happening at massive scale. It has a lot of Twitch viewership stats that are attached to it. And it's a new form of entertainment. That nobody's doing this anywhere. And it's happening at scale. So what happens with these communities and creators is they jumpstart new experiences. And then there's a lot of other creators that build technical tools that allow for these, for instance, these servers to host more people than the actual GTA server, for instance. And also, so the creators can be technical, they could be front, they could be back, they can be actually content creators in these environments. There's a mishmash of content that is an outcome of the experience. So the experience emerges content, which emerges creation, and that has infinite scale and infinite demand. And at the core of that, kind of Mishi touched upon it before, is the ability of that experience to gather a community around it, and that becomes a very strong nucleus. It doesn't need to be a big community. These are the building blocks of the metaverse. These are the experiences the creators yearn for and build for. It's going to be en masse. Game companies and IP holders will allow that to happen. The metaverse will be built on its own from these types of people and these types of communities. And then, of course, there's going to be initiatives of big companies who are going to help, or for instance, like us, that we want to provide the kind of picks and shovels for these people to express themselves. But that's how we see it forming. That kind of ties in everything together.
I do think that what you're describing resonates with my hypothesis that the metaverse will introduce a whole new economy, right? I think today we're talking about certain games. You've mentioned GTA, certain, let's call it game platforms like Minecraft. Roblox is obviously a platform. They don't create any content on their own. There's Fortnite Creative Mode. There's a bunch of other platforms, smaller and less known, from VR Chat to Rec Room to Yahaha and Core and so on and so forth. What is clear is that what we're seeing so far with TikTok, what we're seeing with Roblox, with Minecraft, with modding, that, as you said, has been around for the last 2.5, maybe 3 decades. There's nothing new about user-generated content. But I think what's clear is that some of the bigger platforms are going to potentially really lean on this ability for anyone, anywhere, at any point to create content. Now, some of them will build massive businesses. I mean, the biggest business on Roblox today is a game called Adopt Me that generates potentially anywhere from $50 to $70 million a year in revenue. That's already a company. It's a business, right? But it started with 2 kids in a bedroom or in a garage working on it. Mishi, I'm sure you guys at Blueberry think that as we speak, probably the next Chanel is creating the next amazing dress for avatars, and she's probably 13 years old and she's sitting in her bedroom and she's creating a virtual avatar item. And I think what's exciting is that not only this is happening, there is the proliferation of anyone, anywhere, at any point of time can create content from this platform. What's also fascinating is that a lot of them at the moment are young people. A lot of them are young. Many of them are teenagers. Some of them are kids. And I think that is also a fundamental shift because we're raising a whole new generation. And I like to use the Roblox example. Roblox started by teaching kids how to basically learn to code, Then they use that knowledge to learn to code a game. Then they use that knowledge to learn to code a game that they can monetize. Then they use that knowledge to learn to code a game that monetize, and they can build a business. And suddenly you have millions of young people around the world, either in GTA or Minecraft or Roblox or other platforms, that are pumping this economy. And we're only at the very, very beginning, which is exciting. Mishi, do you want to add anything?
I mean, game moderation, I think that the one that is for people to relate to the easiest, everybody remembers World of Warcraft and Warcraft, right? It inspired world's biggest games like Heroes of New Earth, League of Legends. Dota 2 is a derivation of Warcraft. So I do feel like this was coming for a long time. It just took a minute for the market to get on top of it. And Roblox did an excellent job. And it took them a long time to get market validation too. I remember when they were first trying to push their platform, and it was flat for multiple years before it finally picked up. So the industry is still in its infancy stage, but we're seeing more and more mass adoption. And it's not just a scaling slowly kind of industry. It's the kind where this is an inflection point. Like Shahar mentioned, it's just going crazy high. So I'm excited to see what happens next.
Mishi, you founded Blueberry in 2012 after trying, according to your own story, a cute outfit for your own avatar. 3D avatars are obviously emerging as one of the most exciting areas in the metaverse space, right? I think people talk a lot about digital fashion. I think beauty is a massive space. And again, it's because people are excited about creatively expressing themselves, just like they do in real life. They're excited to do it in these new virtual platforms. What is kind of Blueberry's vision as a company and your vision on where the space is going of digital fashion, digital beauty, and why now is the timing that all of this is erupting?
Let me put it extremely simply here, and then let me elaborate on that. I mean, we believe that people are spending more and more time digitally. We believe that digital self-expression matters. And the easiest way for people to do that is through their avatar. But when we talk about digital fashion, gamer fashion and the way that we view real life fashion are completely different things, but they're just as valid as each other. An armor that would make you look like, what are you wearing? It's not even Halloween on the street, can be extremely cool and top seller on digital spaces. So when we think about digital fashion, I am not thinking couture dresses. I am thinking about what the culture is in that community. Is it streetwear? Is it Tokyo downtown? Is it some dystopian futuristic thing? Is it medieval? And they all have their own culture and their own fashion. So it goes back to Shahar's comments on building experiences. GT is going to have a completely different fashion sense than Sims, for example, but they're just as valid as New York Fashion Week. It has a huge economy and it is a growing market. So when we look at digital fashion, we try to remove the limitations of what that means in real life. And that can be so much fun. In the virtual spaces, you don't have to worry about the dress fitting to avatar's portions. It all scales with the avatar. You don't have to worry about gravity. The customer can click a button and change it from black to this emerald green. It can sparkle. You can run and your jeans can throw flames behind it or glow. So there's just so much you can do in digital spaces. But I don't necessarily want to limit it, in my vision, to one-on-ones of real-life fashion. We want it to be more. And in fact, we're seeing digital fashion, in the sense that I mentioned, influence real-life fashion. In last year's Met Gala, there was this dress that Blake Lively wore. She took the steps in one way, and then they came and unbuttoned something with her dress, and it turned into a whole different color thing. It was very Metaverse inspired. And then there was another fashion show, I believe it was in Paris, where they painted on a dress, just like it would be in ZBrush, how we build dresses. We paint it and then we subtract the dress and it becomes 3D. They did it in real life. So we see a lot of inspiration from digital fashion to real life, and that's really fun. But what I want for happen is for people to think about digital fashion as in the communities and the experiences that they're buying into and what kind of content that they are inspired by.
This is fantastic. I'll tell you what I get
I'm
excited.
terrible at tying these things.
No, it's great. I'll tell you what I get excited about. What I get excited about is the intersection of video games and social media becoming basically virtual worlds in 3D that are social experiences, which I think is what a lot of what we're seeing now. But then adding the commerce component. And in my mind, it's not just the commerce as virtual goods. I think for me, it's also, we need to make sure, in my mind, that we're not building these isolated dystopian virtual worlds that are replacing real life. I think we need to make sure that we're building virtual worlds that inspire real life and are inspired by real life. And also, there is a symbiotic relationship, right? You've mentioned the example of Blake Lively. Imagine how amazing it is that you walk around some virtual world and you purchase some digital item or an outfit or a dress, and you're also able to purchase that and actually like use that in real life. And maybe there's something that takes advantage of augmented reality technologies where your identity virtually is actually part of your identity in real life. Because in my mind, when a 9-year-old today, Shahar, probably your son, I don't know to what extent they separate between these two identities in their mind. I think for them, this is who they are. And I think that symbiotic relationship between virtual and real life, in my mind, that's part of where I believe the evolution of the category will go, which is it starts to merge together. Like, I don't want to go too big and say, oh, we're all going to be like semi-cyborgs. Maybe that happens after Elon Musk figures out Neuralink and create chips that we put in our bodies. But I do believe that there's an opportunity, and I think it will happen where our virtual identity and our physical identity will merge in a way that is really interesting, in a way that no one really expects how it will look like. And it will start with young people. My 17-month-old baby, she's a Metaverse native baby. She's going to be grown into a world that looks like that. And I think that's what's exciting about the next 5, 7, 10 years, is that all of those things will come to life, and I believe in surprising ways that we can't really anticipate at the moment. Powered by creators, of course.
So that reminds me of a funny story. Let me squeeze it in there. I think it's relevant. My best friend, she has a 10-year-old son, and last year we were picking him up from school, and I had just bought myself a Balenciaga bag. I mean, this is a 10-year-old boy we're talking about. He gets in the car, and I tell him, hey, how was your day? Did you have fun at school? And then he goes, oh, you're wearing a Balenciaga bag, Aunt Mishi. I'm like, what do you know about Balenciaga? And it's because he plays Fortnite, and Fortnite did a collaboration with Balenciaga, and now Balenciaga is cool. And cool, I'm a cool person. So it's definitely, there's something to say about taking the metaverse very seriously for the upcoming generation, as they are, because their friends are buying and wearing these assets, they are acknowledging the brand's value through that. So there is something to say about that. There is the virtual creators, and then there's an opportunity for brands to collaborate with those creators and reach a whole new audience. And they care.
Yes, I'll add to that, because that's something we're also doing in Overwolf. We're teaming up with brands to run special activations within these types of games. And part of what we're trying to build out, so we're trying to build the initial phases of what you imagined is going to come. It's easy for us, I think we've seen it also with the Web3, it's easy for us to fantasize about a certain reality, but the reality is actually sometimes way further away. Like certain things need to be happening. And what we at Overwolf is trying to build that commerce ground floor that you talked about, because it's going to be a mix of brand activation, advertisement, virtual goods. It's going to be an ecosystem of commerce around incentivization of UGC as well, and making sure that environment is built in a safe, secure way. is at the forefront of what we're trying to do and do with AAA studios like EA now with our deal with The Sims and so forth. But that is the base ground of what's going to facilitate all this, because what we find out is that once you introduce economy and financial incentives into UGC environments, the players align. So one of the biggest problems or one of the biggest challenges with UGC is moderation and safety. Because once you can create content, there's always going to be bad actors. And once big players are involved and big brands are involved, that's just not something that can happen. That's part of the reasons UGC didn't happen yet, is because there's just not enough know-how to build the system around restriction and kind of moderation and QA of content and safety. So these things are being built right now. Our platform has specialized in moderation and safety for the last 6-7 years, working with Riot and Activision and Blizzard and the biggest games to know how to stop bad actors. And I think that the more the big players get comfortable in understanding that's a solvable solution, the base floor of economy, commerce, advertisement, micropayments, and UGC incentivization could take place. And once that takes place, then we're going to start to see all these events happen and all these creations happen that are going to start to build to where you spoke about is the end point, which could be probably what you talked about. Today, if you think about it, Alexa and Metaverse is not so hard to team up physical and virtual world. Like the infrastructure is already there. What's not there is the actual, okay, so how do we tie in all the players together and make it safe? And I think that we're a step away from that. And once that's set, the sky's the limit of where that could go.
So let's switch gears and talk a bit about what we're seeing in terms of this significant change in how the gaming industry, which really has traditionally been closed, is now kind of approaches collaborations with creators. And Shahar, with Overwolf, you guys are at the forefront of that. You guys recently announced a partnership with The Sims, the legendary Sims, the amazing franchise that it is, to create an official program for creators with a monetization component. My question is, why The Sims? Why now? And what are you already learning from this partnership that can help you decide what's next and what's coming? Not necessarily what's the next game you're doing, but more, what are you seeing in terms of user behavior?
So I want to say a few things and guide me with your questions because I can elaborate in many different ways. It's the last thing is this deal with EA and Maxis is by far not trivial. There's no big studio at that scale that has outsourced or has taken on an exterior vendor to deal with UGC. This is the issue they're all facing. They see Roblox, they see Minecraft, they see Fortnite Creative, and they're understanding that a generation up, if the games are not going to serve UGC components, there's a big chance the games are not going to exist versus the competition. So there are studios, which there's a few categories of studios. There are those who don't have any UGC. They don't have any strategy around how to deal with it. There are those that don't have any strategy but have a massive UGC in the community, like The Sims. They have a strategy. The Sims and EA have done a wonderful job with the creators, but they just see the demand for content. Sims is a very content-driven game. The user base demands constant DLCs, constant more and more, and they just can't. The studio can't produce it, so they need to outsource this job to their creators. But that's a problem because then all the things I talked about are starting to open up, and how do you price it, and it's a mess. So because we have experience from building overlays and in-game apps, and we run CurseForge.com, which is the biggest website for Minecraft and World of Warcraft mods, we managed to build Eternal, which is an offering for studios to run a UGC ecosystem. So part of implementing Eternal on your gamer ecosystem, there are phases, and those phases start with working with CurseForge.com, which is the depository of mods. And that's what we've done with Maxis, where there's a step that allows for them to understand, give more of a platform for their creators, and start to see how they can manage and arrange this community and give it tools that before didn't exist. One place to upload, download mods. All the mods are organized. There's no broken links, and when you update mods, and commerce and everything that goes with that. And I think it's the market demand for more and more content and gamers And for the communities that already have existing robust modding communities, it's hard, but it's an easier step. But because these companies and some of these titles are so huge and they're so profitable, it's very tough for them. It's a change of mindset. So studios, since the beginning of time, the majority of studio was anti-UGC. They've done everything from cease and desist letters to just not allowing that to happen in any way. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I think that this deal with EA is a certain kind of an inflection point from the market.
Yeah, seriously, well done, you guys.
And it took a long time. It took us, I think, over 18 months to do this. I mean, these are huge corporations.
Yeah.
It's a massive change. And they already have a robust, and they handle the robust modding community. But there's now a lot of other studios that don't have any UGC strategy in place that are looking to do that. They're afraid. I think over the next 2-3 years, we're going to see a shift more into UGC and hopefully see it thrive more and more. Once that's set, all the things we're talking about metaverse-wise, like words like interoperability, the demand to move between these environments can come after they're set in motion. I do think that Paramishi's venture and everything, I do think it's going to start with your identity and your virtual identity, because that's the thing you care about the most. But I'm confident there's going to be ways that we don't know yet. That's going to be even more important and more expressive than what it is, and what Mishi talked about, the difference between your physical and digital identity. You could do all these cool things. So first step is set the ground for all these communities to do UGC and the big games, because the big games are going to move the dial. When you have a game like The Sims that is going in it, or you don't still have GTA and some of the other big games, but eventually you will have a cohort of these, like an alliance of huge game studios that are going to move into this space, and then you're going to see a scale up and like multiples on the activity.
I mean, let's be real. How much more pressure can they handle? The community the demand is so high, and the community is so determined to create their own content. There's only so much pressure. I mean, the writing is on the wall. They're probably just trying to figure out how to safely move forward, like Shahar said. And even way back in 2012, this was so apparent. This Blueberry is not my first rodeo. I'm a serial entrepreneur with a couple exits. So when we first started out, we were talking about, okay, I made a cute dress, and then a few people were asking to buy it. But then 3 years into it, we were generating over $1 million of revenue with 70% net profit margins with a team of 3. Yeah. So when we say there is demand, I mean there is demand. And the game companies, they are now facing the risk of, there's a risk of them becoming irrelevant as more companies move towards enabling UGC, because that content brings the retention. And if you're a game developer watching this, retention is the one metric that you cannot compromise on. So we are huge fans of Overwolf. I think that they're doing an incredible job bridging the gap between creator companies like us, we are scaling, and bridging that gap with huge game companies, which is going to provide us even more market to grow into. Both of these things have to happen simultaneously. So we're huge fans of Overwolf and very proud to be working with them, and excited for what comes next.
Shahar, I don't know why you're so excited about The Sims. You should be excited about part of your collaboration with Blueberry. So this is a great segue to kind of last piece, which I like to conclude a conversation always with a question. And today we're going to have 2 answers, which is great. And the question is, what's the one thing, and it can be a prediction, it can be an ambition, it can be an hypothesis. What's the one thing you want the audience to take away from this conversation today?
First of all, anything that has to do with ads and advertisement, you have to get into the UGC space, either through us or through some other company that does advertising in games, because there's a huge shift that is happening in mass into games. And, you know, the gamers we have are not on Facebook and Instagram. They're AAA, AA, hardcore gamers. They're doing their game. So you can't reach them any other way. And that's a trend that's going to grow and grow. And there's special activations that can be done, and great media and programmatics deals that can be done within the space. So I urge you to go and experience, small, big, just get your feet wet in it The sooner the better, because that's the economy of the future. That's one. For the business side, is just do whatever you can around UGC or try to incorporate it in any way. It doesn't need to be, every field has its shape, because that's where the community and the beat of where things are going is going to go. So you want to beat into those groups that are going to create this trend that is going to shape everything around us. And third, for the metaverse people, I think that eventually this big vision of the metaverse is going to come. I think it's going to take a while, knowing what needs to be built and being on the ground, actually with Overwolf and the team here building it. I see how long we still have to go, but it's coming. So try to get more educated on the space and see where you can fit in. But eventually we're talking about like millions of more value added, because it's going to touch every area of the life. So I believe in the dream. I just think it's going to take a long time. And a side note for me, I'm a little bit frustrated from the metaverse being tied to the whole Web3 crypto world, because I think it's getting a lot of bad slack from it. And I think that people, at least the ones that are in the space, could be smart enough to distinguish and also look at things in a sober way. Things take time, things mature, but UGC is already here. It's happening at scale. You see the biggest companies in the world working on it. So get involved. That's from me.
Great message. Mishi, over to you.
Great. I just want to repeat something I said at the beginning of this podcast, since you disclosed the audience. The gamers, they're not buying into brands. They're not buying into product. They're buying into community. And these communities are formed by creators. The creators, they are not just artists or programmers. They are influencers. And they're not out there like your regular celebrities. Their social media handles are probably their avatar names. That's how immersed we are. I'm not Mishi, I'm Blueberry on the internet. So definitely the brand activations through these communities where they're so engaged, there's so much value to unlock here. I believe that every company is going to have to embrace this space to be relevant to the next generation. There is no going around it. The creators are forming the culture. They're sustaining, they're changing it. So to be part of that ecosystem, I encourage brands to connect and work with platform native creators. And Overwolf is a great way to do that. We are doing a bunch of collaborations. So excited for what comes next is all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Mishi. All right. Well, Shahar, Mishi, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This has been a really great conversation, and I know the audience is really going to enjoy listening to it.
This is my first podcast, by the way.
Congratulations.
No.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Thanks for making it.
It's been great. I had a lot of fun. Thank you, both of you, for the really great conversation. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the metaverse.